actually is the Boomer Truth regime for those who don't know? Because that's how I originally came across you.
Well, the Boomer Truth regime is basically the paradigm in which we have lived our whole lives that came to fruition after World War II, whereby the ultimate evil is defined as the mid-century Germans, certain man with a moustache that you may be aware of. That is the ultimate evil in our moral paradigm. And the ultimate good is something like John Lennon's Imagine, which for the Zoomers in
I
the
did have to
audience,
Google that.
for the Zoomers in the audience, John Lennon was in a little band called the Beatles, and after they split up, he recorded a song called Imagine, where he sings, "Imagine there's no countries, it's easy if you try. All of the people of the world joined in harmony and peace, where there's no religions, no countries, nothing to kill or die for, etc., etc." And the ultimate good then is something like unlimited individual self-expression, whereby basically there's no any sort of restraint on that individual self-expression is seen as bad. So, if I wanted to identify, let's say, as a woman, or if I wanted to, I don't know, use your imagination, really, who is anybody to stop me or judge me to, to that end? And that is basically the Boomer Truth regime in a nutshell. And, I always say that John Lennon is the kind of positive side of that vision, the unlimited self-expression, and the figure of Winston Churchill is the negative side, i.e., your ultimate kind of mission in life should be to stop the Nazis or something. And that is the Boomer Truth regime.
So, how was this established and who established it then? Like, who came up with this idea? Was it just because it was the opposite of what the mustache man believed, or was it something more than that?
Well, I think the ground zero really was probably the Nuremberg trials, which took place. But then there was also, I would say, a much longer period that the apex of which was the 1960s counterculture, whereby all of the old moral certainties were torn apart and smashed and critiqued and deconstructed to establish a new way, basically. And in this new way, people were expected to establish their own moral way, their own kind of new set of rules that were basically figure it out yourself, which may have sounded good to the hippies in the 60s, but has actually been an absolute disaster, as anybody who's lived in the modern world will surely know, because it turns out that the inherited wisdom of thousands of years has a better idea of what is good for men and women than the kind of dippy ideas of a 20-year-old.
I think something that I've come across, so we did a Vox Pop today, where we were asking whether having children is a good thing. We asked young people, do they want children in the future? Should we encourage people to have children? And they just didn't seem to have any response, any answer, any moral judgment on that. They might have a personal preference, but they couldn't speak out whether people in general should want to have children. It was just an individual personal choice. And I just see this in so many instances wherever I go. Like my sister, she's a millennial, and she has a personal preference. She's relatively traditional in her lifestyle. But again, in terms of things like LGBT stuff, she doesn't really care about the trans stuff, but she doesn't like that I'm against trans ideology, for example. She wants me to leave them alone, stop being mean, like that kind of thing. Same with abortion, same with a lot of these issues. There's just a lack of opinion. It's defined by this NPC ideology. Where do you think that's come from? Is that something you've witnessed as well?
Well, I think it goes back to the same thing, this idea that a kind of individualism is the only moral good. And in that, any sense of a collective sense of community or what is for the greater good as us defined by a group, well, that's bad, because any step towards that is a step towards, literally,
Mm.
you go straight to Hitler, do not pass go, do not collect £200, and that is literally where, the entire moral order takes us. That if you have any step towards putting limits on this individual self-expression or thinking of your people as a group or something like this, then you're basically immediately a Nazi.
Mm.
Right, and it really is as simple and as shallow as that. In my assessment, and well, I mean, the Boomer Truth Regime is planned as a third book in a trilogy. The other two things that kind of two myths that support this worldview, as well as individualism, are democracy, which I critique in the first book, Populist Delusion, and progress, which I talk about in Prophets of Doom. And this is really the kind of new holy trinity: is democracy, individualism, progress. And one of the reasons that you may get what you call this NPC view is that these kind of ideas like women's liberation, gay liberation, now trans liberation, they're seen as steps in this march towards progress, which cannot brook or cannot contemplate any backwards steps. The trouble is that nothing about this march of progress is certain or written in stone, and it terrifies them, the prospect that any of those things could ever go, quote unquote, backwards, which is why back in 2016 you saw this kind of nuclear level hysteria over Donald Trump when he first won, and of course here in Brexit, because it's like, well, you're not meant to do that, you're not meant to go backwards. And now all of these questions that they put beyond debate that had been settled were suddenly back on the table. Well, you can't go, I mean, and this is kind of mind-blowing to someone of a progressive worldview. And of course, the other side of it is this idea of democracy, where we live in a free and fair society where we each get a say in what happens and how things are run and so on and so forth. Problem with that, of course, is that just like progress, it is a myth. And I mean, there's this saying they've got, we were never asked, right?
Mm.
And usually that is applied to the immigration debate that has gone on, not just in this country, but in America and in Germany and France and so on. None of those populations were ever asked if they wanted that. They were never given a referendum or a vote on it. In fact, successive governments promised that they would reduce immigration, and each successive government increased immigration. Last Tory government, for example, as you're well aware, they went on a platform that they were going to reduce it. They actually let in a record number of people. I think it was like 6 million people from 2010 to 2024. But it's not just on that issue. It is on so many other issues too, including issues that are now kind of in the midst of time that people imagine were brought about due to people power, right? Martin Luther King, desegregation. Like, these are controversial topics that are put beyond discussion. They're settled already. They've already happened. There's no going back, right? These are all the phrases they make. But if you actually look into each of those, they were not brought about by people power. They were brought about by an organized minority who had control over certain levers of power, media, legal levers. I mean, in the case of desegregation, it was brought about by legal fiat, by something called Brown versus Board of Education. whereby after that they literally pushed people to go to mixed race schools at gunpoint, and this is seen as something that you shouldn't question or debate. It was essentially the death of freedom of association in America. But this is now like a sacred doctrine that you can't discuss anymore. And the reason that these backward steps were so terrifying to progressives is that if you take one step back, let's say on the trans issue, people then may start thinking, well, what else can we, what else is back on the table? Or, in many cases, when people discover that they've been lied to with certain narratives, they then start thinking, well, what else were we lied to about? And this is where some people get terrified, and so they don't want to open any of those Pandora's boxes. They want to keep them safely locked up and deal with all of them by essentially kind of linguistic kill shots that also kill off any thought of going into those areas. They are considered taboo and beyond discussion. Most people are happy to police that and never go into those areas.
We hope you enjoyed this latest video from Vox Populi. To watch the full video for free, please check out our website, voxpopulimedia.com. Thank you for your support.